Black revolutionaries, distillery owners, Italian fashion retailers, and Motown Grammy winners all share their best stories never before told in any other media outlets on Detroit is Different. Visit DetroitisDifferent.com or download the Detroit is Different app on Apple's App Store or Google's Play Store.
Welcome back to the Detroit is Different podcast studios. And today it feels a little bit like springtime, but it is not. But we embracing any of that sunshine because you definitely need to let that sunshine in. And I got a feeling that we're going to talk a little bit about melanin today, some sunshine, some vitamin D you need, and so much more because Detroit is different. Culture, creativity, and community. And someone that I have today is intersecting all in different ways for you. This is a guest through GMAC. Any of the GMAC guests always are coming with a couple things. Definitely Black empowerment. We definitely talking about self-determination. Really, you can take all of the Kwanzaa principles and add the rest of them 42 principles of Ma'at that you need to be studying if you're really getting down with the people and the culture. Dr. Shelley McIntosh, how are you today?
I'm fine, and it is feels like springtime, but like you said, it still has a little chill to the air.
We in Detroit, you know what I'm saying? That chill is something that you got to get used to.
Oh, yes.
You know, it's not like Chicago, as they say, the hawk is out, but you know, we get used to it. And for any of the guests that are, I shouldn't even know what the hawk is. The hawk means that the wind is a blowing fast. Okay, so for that's a little bit of a urban colloquialism, slang, as they say.
Yes.
But as we continue with this in culture and everything, Detroit, bringing in those Detroit wins. You and your people, what are your roots tied to Detroit? Is your family rooted here? Are you generations deep here? What brings you to Detroit?
My mother and father, Reverend Rufus Miller Jr. and Ruth Miller. So I always give honor to my parents because they have given me life. Mm-hmm. So they were from Century, Florida.
Okay, wait. Century, Florida. Whereabouts is that?
It's not too far from Pensacola. And it's on the border of Alabama.
Okay, so yeah, I was going to say, for people that don't know Pensacola, when I hear Pensacola, the first thing I think is boxing, Roy Jones Jr. and Emmitt Smith and everything like that. But Pensacola is in Florida, but it's the South for real. And I mean, Florida's the South, but sometimes Florida feels like a whole nother world sometimes. But yeah. Pensacola has that feel. But Century, Florida, you said it's close to there. Did you ever visit?
I went to Pensacola, Florida to visit my father after he and my mom separated after 30-some years of marriage. So I did go to Pensacola to visit him. Mm-hmm. But in the early days, say as a child, no. Okay. I didn't know Pensacola. But what I knew was Margaret, Alabama.
Okay, Margaret, Alabama. And that's where I was just about to ask the question because it's not a lot of Floridians that make their way up this trek when it comes to the Great Migration. But people from Alabama and Georgia, it's in all my history of doing Detroit is Different, those two places, it's like almost, you know, everybody from Alabama and Georgia. Exactly. So what from Florida led your parents to come to Detroit?
Well, I'm going to specify it and say Alabama.
Okay.
Alabama. So this is what I speculate. My mother and father had twin daughters in the South. Mm-hmm. These were identical twins, Eunice and Vernice, delivered by a midwife. Mm-hmm. But one of the twins didn't make it. That's my sister Eunice, whom I never met. So Vernice made it, and she was the one that weighed the least, but she survived. And I speculate that in that time, my father felt he could not raise a family in the South because later on in life, he told me that they were poor. So they moved to Detroit and had to be less than a year that they had me. And so I say that I am the first child born up north at Henry Ford Hospital. So I set myself in that context that my mother and father migrated with a small child to Detroit for a better way of life.
Okay. What years, like what era is this?
It's 1948.
So this is like it's already like a wave of Detroiters, but they're kind of like catching that second wave. So did they have family, friends here? What was how did y'all settle in?
Okay, so they were part of the second Black migration. This is what I'm believing.
Mhm.
And so my aunt, my mother's oldest sister, had already migrated, and they went to Chicago.
Mm.
So she sent for my mother. And I believe my mother, either she got married in Chicago or maybe the South, but my oldest aunt was there with my mother. I have a picture of them when my mother and father got married.
Mhm.
So she sent for my mother, and then later on, they sent for their youngest sister. My mother and my youngest aunt on my mother's side, they settled in Detroit.
Okay.
And my oldest aunt settled in Chicago.
Okay. So they felt that hawk, and they was like, I'd rather
Right, let's
to
go.
make my way. We gonna go further down this other side of 94. So
Yes, but I think that with my father, because he was in the Army, he was a sergeant in World War II.
mm,
And since the car companies were recruiting Black people from the South to the North, he was able to get a job at Chrysler.
okay. All right. So whereabouts? What neighborhood?
We grew up in certain neighborhoods, but I'm going to just briefly speak on the one that I remember as a child, but the other one that I do really remember. So I remember living on McGraw Street on the west
Oh
side.
man.
And I also remember living with my aunt on Floyd Street.
Mhm.
But maybe 6, 7 years old, we moved on Fisher on the east side of Detroit
Mhm.
between St. Paul and Kercheval.
Okay.
And so most of my early childhood up until teenage years were spent on the east side of Detroit.
Okay. And if I remember, if I can recall, that Fisher neighborhood is like that would be the neighborhood school over there would be.
It was Scripps at the time.
Mhm.
It
Okay.
was Scripps, McClellan and Kercheval.
Okay. All right. So, what do you remember about the community? What was it like then? What stood out?
So I remember that we were one block from Indian Village.
Mhm.
And we lived in this little house with 2 flats with red tile on the front of the house.
Red tile.
And on the corner of Fisher and St. Paul was Mr. Joe's store. He was Jew.
Mhm.
And I remember him because my mother would tell me to go to the store and tell Mr. Joe that she wanted some bread and put it on credit.
Mhm.
So we got food items from Mr. Joe on credit.
Mhm.
So I remember the house, and I remember a family from Louisiana moving downstairs from us. Very light skinned. That's Miss Mary and Seal and her children. And then there were families that lived across the street. What I remember is that most families did know each other on Fisher, between, again, St. Paul and Kercheval. I remember walking to Scripps School every morning with my sister and with other neighborhood children. I remember Dandy's grocery store on Kercheval and Fisher. Some of the pleasant memories that I remember on Fisher. One is that we felt pretty safe. That was one. We felt pretty safe. Secondly, as a child, sometimes you don't know how poor you are. And I think my mother and father tried to keep that away from us, in a sense. So living on the second level of this 2-family flat, we didn't have a basement. And so she had to wash clothes in the dining room. And in the wintertime, we had to hang those clothes in the dining room. My father put up
Clothesline.
clotheslines. In the summertime, we could hang them outside.
In 1 second, let me explain what clothesline is for any of the young people right now. Okay, a clothesline, if you watch any of the like older films, especially like Color Purple or something, you'll see like these long lines usually outside, and you'll see shirts or maybe linens on them. That's a clothesline. And then hence the oh man, now my vocabulary has left me. The clips, what would those be? The wooden clips, clothespins. So you see these wooden clips and clothespins. Usually now they're like colored and used for other things, but the clothespins, hence on the clothesline, would exist. And actually, a lot of basements, like my older basements in Detroit, still have them where it'll be holes and you can rotate the clothes through the clothesline through the clothespins. So all right, I just wanted to get that context so people kind of know, like, what is this? You know.
Yes, but those were the freshest sheets that could hang outside. And then you could take them inside, take your bath, get on those sheets. It felt like heaven.
And obviously, you see, this is a different time because right now people be like, you going to put your clothes outside? They going to steal it? I don't even like going to the cleaners, the laundromat. It's like, yes, there was a sense of community where your clothes could be outside and nobody would be like, oh, I'm taking that shirt. You know?
Right. There was a sense of community. And so even the family that lived downstairs, my mother and Miss Mary, they would, trade sugar and Clorox and Miss Mary, since she was from maybe Louisiana, but Miss Mary could fix some real delicious gumbo. And so that was the first time I saw someone wring a chicken's neck. Miss Mary did that in the backyard.
Okay. All right. We definitely going to talk a little bit about this poultry science. So it's a lot to it. But also, I wanted to bring up Louisiana and you're saying Alabama, but like on that border, that Alabama-Florida coast. Because Louisiana is another place where it's not a lot of people from Louisiana in Detroit. A lot of people from Louisiana usually went west, like Texas, California. Some went to Chicago. Like it's that feel in blues. Hence, we love the blues here in Detroit. It's different, but that's also a different feel in stories. So I can imagine just the scents, the smells, the spices coming out of that home was a little bit different than possibly a couple doors down.
That's so true. And so I saw her wring the neck, right? Saw the chicken in the backyard, and that was scary. But about an hour later, we smelled the gumbo. That took that fear away. We ate the gumbo.
Yes. Yes.
So Miss Mary had about 7 children. And I remember Mr. Gray's family across the street. He had 7 children too. And I can't remember the neighbors directly across the street from us. But the neighbors would sit out on the porch. They would communicate with each other. And they kept an eye on the kids.
And were the kids all like close in age, or were you the youngest, oldest? What that's like, because that can also give gateways, as there was a lot of kids here when I was a kid, and just you learn a lot of communication skills playing. You also learn like leadership skills, and you learn a lot of personalities.
Yes.
So were you like were the kids close in age, or were they much older than you? Were you one of the youngest?
We're about close in age, I would think, because we were. If you think about elementary age children, that's who we were.
Oh, so y'all went to school and it was like my block, like if one of y'all got into a fight, everybody got into a fight probably.
Well, no, if my sister got into a fight, then I would get into a fight. Because that's exactly what I did. I don't know. Everybody, they see me as being quiet, and I am. But sometimes I tell them, look, I'm from the Eastside, so there's another side of me too.
Hilarious.
But my sister, she told me that this guy was messing with her, and I was in the 5th grade. But I was trying very hard to win the Safety Girl Award. And so I was really...
Explain what the Safety Girl Award is, because that is taking us to a level in school. Yes, what is that?
So Safety Girls and boys helped other students to cross the street.
Okay, like a crossing guard.
Like a crossing guard, but they used children, a lot of children back then. And so we would get this little white strap that crisscrossed across our chest, and we would be out there helping students to cross the street. We thought it was a great responsibility, at least I did. And so there was supposed to be an award for the for the best one. And I was really watching the way I walk across the street or how I escorted other children and all of that. They always did have an adult there too, so the child wasn't out there by themselves. But she told me, my sister Jackie said some guy had been messing with her, and so the adult guard was out there, and I was walking across the street with her and him, and I don't know what hit me, but I just reared back and punched him in the jaw. And I never got my award.
I was gonna say, yeah,
I was out. I was through.
Yeah, the safety was. It's like we try to protect these people. That beat them up. What's going on here, Shelley?
Yeah. So I won that. So at Scripps, that's where I went up until the 5th grade.
Okay.
And some things that really stick with me. I'm going to just say one in particular. I always give honor to my mother and father, always, because they both tried their best to raise their children. So they were parents, not just someone who gave birth to a baby. But my father told me that they were poor in Alabama, and he wanted us to live a better life. And he also said to get your education, because when you get that, no one can take that away from you. So I didn't know he was talking basically about white oppression. I didn't know that. But when we were 7, my younger sister was 7, I was 8, and my older sister was 9. We're 3 years apart. And I have one brother who's 4 years younger than I am. But I can remember this so vividly. My father took his 3 girls, and he walked us to the library on Montclair and Mack. It's no longer a library now.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm thinking of the intersection, and I'm like,
It switched to a church after it was closed after the rebellion. So my mother and my father took us there, and I can just remember that day. It was in the summertime. He walked us those 13 blocks to the library on Montclair and Mack. I can still see the cards he taught us how to fill out, those library cards. There were no computers back then. So we did it on cover stock. And then he told us we can pick out any books that we wanted to. So I picked 3 books, and he walked us back home. I read those books. My father never had to take us to the library again because through his demonstration, we went every 2 weeks on our own.
interesting.
And we would check out new books. So I credit him for giving me the love of reading. So he said you can read anything here, commentaries, because he was a pastor, commentaries, illustrators, encyclopedias, you can read anything. But you need to get your education. So again, I can vividly remember that as I reflect on why I love to read so much.
So also, like as you talk about that, here's some other context for people. That's like the Dewey Decimal System. So at one point in time with libraries, and I remember this because you would do this in elementary, you would have a class where you go to the library and you learn how to engage with the library. Actually, I was one of those library aides in middle school.
Okay.
In the library inside of Halley Magnet Middle School, because at one point in time, DPS had libraries in all the schools as well. But through this databasing system, Dewey Decimal, you would look up what type of book, who the author was, what year it was published, like a whole catalog of ways of knowing how to find where books would be and where books would be cataloged. This is obviously switched to digital now. A lot of the books are digital right now, especially for anybody going through college. And you may wonder, like, okay, why is the database system to find these articles in journals so what it is? Because it comes from a library-based system. I just wanted to get that context for the people listening.
Wow, I'm glad you did because I forgot it was the Dewey Decimal System, but
Yeah.
exactly that's what it was.
And with this love for reading and your father growing up in a household with a pastor, what was that like being a PK, as they call it, preacher's kid? I'm guessing you were in there you were probably in church like 4 days a week. You was in Bible study, you was in choir practice, you were in service, you was after service. What was that like? What was the service? What was the church? What do you remember your childhood experiences in service?
Okay, so I'm going to preface that first saying that we moved off of Fisher to Bewick,
Oh, okay.
between Vernon and Charlevoix.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So my father, because he believed in being a pastor, he never drank. He never used profane words. He never danced. And he never hit my mother. And so, in terms of believing that we should not listen to secular music, he told us that we couldn't
At all.
at all.
So, and this is during a time Motown is like coming alive during this time, like running concurrent. But even before Motown, you had the great Highland Park's best Jackie Wilson and other things happening around the time. So I'm sure you know of this just being a child, but it's just not anything that you ever could bring home and ever connect with.
I knew every Motown song, every Motown group. I knew how to do the hustle, the grapevine, the jerk, the funky chicken. He couldn't keep that away. That was all throughout the neighborhood. You walk down Bewick Street, that's all you're going to hear is Motown.
Yes.
And so that part he couldn't protect us from. I only purchased the 45. And that was Dancing in the Street.
Martha Reeves.
Martha Reeves, that's right. So we danced outside of the house, and later on he let us go to parties.
Okay.
In terms of going to church, yes, it was an all-day thing. And before he could purchase a car or could afford a car, we had to walk from Bewick to St. Jean to catch the bus to the west side. His church, Greater Love Baptist Church, was on the west side of Detroit on Joy Road.
Okay, and let's talk a little bit about that, because nowadays, I guess the most prevalent thing in faith is a lot of the non-denominational churches. But then Methodist, Baptist, Kojic, like it was some clear, distinct differences. My grandmother grew up Presbyterian, so in a Presbyterian church, like you would know the feel. Like I remember being a child going to the first Kojic service I went to, and I was like, whoa, this is like a different feel. This is a different energy. And even the Baptist service, and then when like a friend would come to me with the Presbyterian service, it's like, okay, sometimes the scriptures, the flow of the service, it would be different. What was that Baptist feel like then in your dad's service?
Okay, so in my dad's service, the opening of the service would always begin with the deacons. Okay, they would be praying at the I'm going to call it the table at the front of the church. They would be praying there, and so we had gospel songs, these uplifting gospel songs where people could pat their feet and clap their hands. Even before he started his sermon, he would always do some hymn, even though he couldn't sing really well. So it's like, Lord, I stretch my hands to thee, no other help I know. And then the church would repeat that, singing, Lord, I stretch my hands to thee, no other help I know. If thou withdraw thyself from me, oh, whither shall I go? And it was like this humming rhythm that the church was singing. We had offering, like other churches. We had the Baptist Training Union that we went to on Sundays. We had a 3-church fellowship, 3 missionary Baptist church fellowship, where those pastors and their congregations would come to our church. I remember us having to learn Christmas and Easter speeches, and I thought that really helped us in terms of getting up in front of people, learning a poem and having to present that to the church congregation.
And what runs fluid in this is, and I'm not as entrenched in it because I've still only learned of it, but like that Baptist tradition, especially when we think of the Black Baptist tradition, having songs so intertwined in rhythm and dance, it's like, it's a different feel. And even within this, and this is what's so unique, I think, when I think especially of that denomination of what's Baptist, because as this is running concurrent with so many Black folks, because it's connecting in song, spirit, and rhythm, and in some of the, I mean, we think of just the anchor, New Bethel Baptist Church, and Aretha Franklin, and C.O. Franklin, and what exists. This also is during a wing, especially in that time. We think of like the 40s, the 50s, as much as this is coming out of the Black Baptist Church, a place of community, a place of organizing. The Southern White Baptist Church is the same place that the Black Baptist Church is organizing against. And this is kind of the dichotomy that a lot of people just always have with, like, what's going on? How are things happening? Was this spoke to in the service because, or how was it looked at? Just because I know that during that time, 40s, 50s, 60s, this is like a pulse where some of the conversations begin to be had as the bombing of churches, the assault on churches, a lot of the organizing that was happening in churches. I mean, when we think of brothers like Medgar Evers and so much in those connections, I give this because I know that I'm just fresh off of an event partnered with the James Gracely Boggs Center, where they speak of so much of a lot of what led to Malcolm X's message to the grassroots speech starts from a direct relationship where C.O. Franklin, and at the time, Reverend Clegg, Reverend Jaramogi, that started the Shrine of the Black Madonna. And I know we're going to definitely get into some Black Christian doctrine. Mm-hmm. That was in response to a lot of these actions in 68, where things are at like a fever pitch of a lot of folks here are like, look, what's going on down there is something we connecting to, and we want to see some change. So I just want to present that.
Okay. So in my father's church, since if you talk about the 50s and 60s, then I am a child and then I'm a teenager. Mm-hmm. And so in his church, I did not hear my father speak about civil rights movement. My father belonged to the Masons, which is a secret society, which I didn't know a whole lot about. Then later, after his passing, I found out that he was an activist, but he never talked about that to us, to his children.
I want to add this caveat. So Masonry, another thing is I have a great-grandfather that would have been a Mason. So if you're a Black Mason, a Prince Hall Mason, which is another one of those things like the Baptist Church that's segregation in America go hand in hand, just for people to know, all right? Just straight up. But, okay, so as this is happening, I'm sure you're seeing this prevalent as a teenager.
So I saw it when I started high school, Southeastern High School.
Juggaleers.
Juggaleers, yes. I'm trying to think of the times that my father and my mother never spoke of the difficulties they had, real difficulties they had in the South. And they did not speak openly to us about civil rights. And it may be because in those days, children's worlds were different than parents' worlds. And what I mean by that is if I am in the living room and my mother and her friend is there and they begin to talk, she immediately tells me I have to leave. So we didn't listen to too much adult conversation. We were so trained that if another adult came in the room and my mother or father was there, all they had to do was look at us and we left.
Things haven't changed. Big time. Which is some critiques where people say that was the wrong way. Some critiques say that was the right way, which goes to the archives of Detroit is Different. Great story, comedian Coco, almost like an auntie, where she tells the story of her mother at a time where they were harboring a man seeking asylum from defending his family against the Ku Klux Klan, where her mother is approached at the age of 6 by sheriffs saying, "Hey, is this man here?" And she knew not to say anything. So sometimes I think we contextualize, like, we'll have revisionist history about how things functioned in the past. It's like, oh, that was wrong. You should have always opened up. And it's like some of these mechanisms that seem backwards for possibly contemporary times were safety mechanisms back then, because it was a lot of dangers that could be associated. Or when we also speak of Jimmy Boggs, Donald Boggs, Jimmy Boggs' son, speaks about, my father did not speak so much of the South and his experiences because of the traumas associated with that. Or even, as you said, you didn't travel back, because these are things that is some pain.
Yes, it's a lot of pain, and I believe that he did it out of protection. Whatever trauma they had in the South, he didn't want his children to go through the same thing.
Yeah.
So there was a distinct line between the adult world and the children's world. Okay, so it was in high school that I began to see what was going on, and that was because it was being televised.
Yeah.
The Civil Rights Movement. I lived through the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., through the assassination of Robert Kennedy, through the assassination of Malcolm X, assassination of John F. Kennedy, before the age of 20. And that began this whole process of why are these things going on? In fact, in 1968, when the rebellion broke out in Detroit, then was it, the 67 rebellion, it was 67 rebellion. And I was in high school. And so our high school was closed down. The city was locked down. It was under military control. But my high school, Southeastern, was locked down, and the National Guard took over. That's where they resided, in Southeastern. And we could hear them in the morning doing their cadences and marching up and down the streets because Detroit was on curfew. You had to be in at 9 o'clock. But you could hear them marching early in the morning. So my father, this is what he taught me to do at that particular time, because there were the rebellion, there was the army controlling the city. So he had a gun that he had gotten from, I don't know, it's from the army. It's a German gun, German Luca. I can remember that. So he took it out. He showed me how to take the safety off, and I'll put the safety on. And we lived on the second flat on Bewick Street. So he said, if anyone comes through that door, just start shooting. So that was the protective lesson that he was trying to teach me at that particular time.
Yes, it's interesting. That's another story Coco tells about just even that relationship with firearms then versus now, which I think that culture is different now. I mean, video games and just the pervasive movies and things like that. But firearms, especially if you got family from the South, old family from the South, guns would be everywhere. And you just knew not to touch them. Whereas today, I think things just have culturally shifted. And I just wanted to give that moment and pause of society does have impacts on how people respond to things, not overall, but contextualizing things. And that's usually when I stop. So at that point, being learned, being at SC, I don't know at the point you graduate, but all before 20, after Southeastern, where's your journey take you? And now that you've processed so much more, seeing certain things, where's your state of mind at?
Okay. So first I want to say that Bewick was safe. It's not, people don't feel it's safe anymore. Bewick and Mac, that whole Eastside was safe because a lot of people migrated from Alabama. And so they still had that community feel. Again, children walked to school together because the schools were in the neighborhoods, right? And so every morning there's going to be hundreds of kids walking to school, to the elementary school, to Foch, which is right across. Foch is a middle school, which is right across from Southeastern. So then you got students walking to school every morning, coming home after school is over. You got Motown music playing and the barbecue aroma going through the East Side. My mother could send me on Mac and Bewick at nighttime. It wouldn't feel afraid to do that. The whole Mac Street was full of businesses, and you had black doctors and black dentists up there. In fact, that's where I had to go to, the black dentists up there. So what I'm saying is that the East Side was completely different than what it is. So after I graduated in 1968, and I did graduate number 10 in my class. There were about 350. I was the top 10.
Congratulations.
I was also vice president of my high school class. After that, I did go to Wayne State. My first choice was to be a physical therapist. And so I went there with about 3 other friends, and we had to take this math test to get into a math class. So I was doing pretty good in my science classes, but when I went to take this math test to get into the math class, I failed it. So they said, well, you need to take a remedial. You need to take a remedial class. I'm trying to think if this is the same place. Yes, and I did take the remedial class, but then when I took the test again, I failed it.
So being such a scholarly student and being so learned, being well-read and everything, and graduating top 10 of your class, and dealing with something that looks like an obstacle. Some could label that as defeat. How did you deal with that at the time to move forward in that path?
Okay. So there were, Wayne State had started its physical therapy program. We were the first. So there were about 30 students in there and 8 blacks. I was the last black to drop out. So that math class was a filtering out process to me. And so we found out later that a lot of the Caucasian students had other people to take their tests. There were no computers back then in that operation. So they got into the math class, which was easier than the test itself. So I went on at the university, and I switched from physical therapy. Yeah, I switched from physical therapy and then said I'm going to take some business courses. So that is what I did. I went into a sociology class, which was a liberal arts class, and this professor specifically said that black people were inferior. And so the textbook had a story, research, on children in Africa who could recognize their mothers at 2 weeks and who could walk at 5 months. This is research in the textbook that he gave us. So I said in class one day, no, black people are not inferior. This research shows how African children basically are superior. And so he told me, oh, don't worry about that. That's nothing. And I just sat there shocked because he didn't use the own research. And I did not or would not have someone else just to call me inferior. I have a mother and a father. If you're calling me inferior, you're saying everybody whom I'm connected with, my people, you're saying that we're all inferior. I'm not taking that. So I did not, at that point, it was the feeling. It was the feeling. It wasn't all the scholarly part now because I had, but it was the feeling. And so I quit after 3.5 years at a university. I quit, and I told myself as a young person, why am I still here when I could make some money?
All right, now, a couple different things that I want to add as, me adding flavor to most of these discussions. First, the relationship between black people in America has always been kind of a rocky one. Ain't no kind of a rocky one. The relationship between black people and Wayne State University, definitely a rocky one. Shout out to one of my mentors, Chokwe Lumumba, Doctor, and then we think of Jeffrey Edison and the way those brothers went in there and outscored everyone on their law exam, passing the bar and getting into law school and everything, and what they went through. Shout out to Dr. Ken Fensei and so many of the others, and Daryl Dawsey and Ken Cockrell Jr., Mama Shoshana, and all the fights to get the Africana Studies Department there at Wayne State. Gary from Plowshares and so many others. And that's something that I really want to tell that story through Detroit is Different. And just the strifes of what that means. It's similar as you talk about sociology, as I'm big into that world. I really was big in that later on. I was at Henry Ford Community College at the time, and I'm in an anthropology class, and they're talking about how people come from apes, and the only group of people that don't have the ape genome are Black people. And, it's back to like some information in the book. So I'm like, so basically what you're saying is that Black people don't have this. So you're saying Neanderthals have this. Neanderthals are your people. So you're saying your people based on this book. And it's like, sometimes my big mouth can get me into a lot of trouble. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I wasn't trying to press my anthropology teacher. I actually liked my anthropology teacher. But sometimes when 2 and 2 equal 4, you have to represent the information even to a professor.
Yes.
In the context. But it takes a lot of courage to do that, because the setting of a college course, even though it's built in critical thinking and supposed to spark the brain, the challenge of this person presenting in front of you as a professor and you sitting from the class structure, especially back then when I assume most of the professors were tenured professors. And for people that don't know the difference between a tenured and nowadays, I think most professors are adjunct, meaning like basically a tenured professor, you almost would have to like walk into the school and shoot somebody, as like our former president said, to lose your job. An ad hoc professor is someone that is, and I think that schools are exploiting a lot of ad hoc professors just due to the state of academia being more of a business now. But back then, I assume everyone was almost tenured. So it was a space of comfort to be arrogant and be beyond self-confident, which leads to that arrogance to present information like that to students, especially a Black student at that time. And I could completely see, like, look, I ain't got time for this. And you having the courage to do that is a heck of an action, especially at the time of people even today saying like, well, you went this far and you could have did this and you could have did that. So, all right. So at that point, that takes a lot of courage, making that transition, but definitely understandable. Where are you getting this courage from to do something that I'm sure it was a lot of people, possibly family, friends, acquaintances, like, what you doing?
The feeling to speak up against the professor?
Well, to not just speak up against the professor, but say, look, I'm going to pick this up. I'm going to get into business right now. And we'll pick this college journey up when we pick this college journey up.
Okay. I oftentimes think about that. And I'm going to have to acquaint it to listening to my inner voice. But I couldn't say that at that particular age. I'm just reflecting on it. So I left the university and said to myself, I can make more money. I can make more money leaving this place, right? I didn't even talk to my mother and father about it. I just decided.
So I'm sure the response was like, what you doing?
Brother Kyrie, they did not even really question me about that. So I took a test for the city, to work for the city. And I did get the position of a stenographer. So, which means back then you could take shorthand. I'm sure many don't know what shorthand is, but it's a different language in writing. And so you listen to your boss. He wants a letter written. You put it write it in shorthand, and later on you go back and you transcribe that. So I started as a stenographer, the city of Detroit, in the public relations department.
Okay.
Okay, so
okay, let me, more context. Stenographer is the person that is typing in the courtroom, and at one point in time, I know I had it. It was a class called typing. Shout out Miss LaFour at Northwestern. She was the most hardcore person, boy, with the computers and word processors, typing teachers, boy. Talk about a ruler and hitting the hand. Man.
You know what?
And I still peck at the keyboard. She would be if I see Miss LaFleur right now, she'd be like, "What you doing?" And my mama too. It's like I'm good at pecking. But
Wow. Okay. So can I just tell a little quick story about that then?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon was our 8th grade typing teacher, keyboard. And I can still see Mr. Dixon because little round rim, gold rim glasses, always in a suit and tie. We're 8th graders. He's telling us we have to learn the keyboard. You know, we're not paying much attention to that. He said, learn the keyboard. We didn't learn the keyboard. So we come in there one morning, and all of these manual typewriters, not electric, manual typewriters, they all had every key had a little piece of white tape on it. So we couldn't see the letters. And so we're asking Mr. Dixon, why do you have this tape? What's wrong with the typewriters? He said, I told you all to learn the home keys and you didn't do it.
hilarious.
And he said, now watch me. So he started typing on a manual, swinging that carriage, typing and swinging that carriage. He stopped after a minute. He said, do you know what I've done? No. 100 words per minute with no errors.
Okay. And that used to be the standard. Hence the whole concept of a lot of luxuries we have nowadays. And she said manual keyboard. So, typewriter, meaning like it was this, you probably see it in old movies, like this big heavy metal. My mama had one, metal machine. You would load the paper up and it would be ink on the key. You would ink the, each key would like link to something where it like jerk out and peck. You'd be typing at it. So hence, technically, your hands are supposed to be placed, if you're not pecking at the board like me, at a certain place where each one of your fingers, just like playing a piano, will hit a different key where you know what's going on. Hence, a stenographer definitely will be able to just look and type away. So the standard used to be 100 words per minute. Nowadays, I mean, through transcribing and Chat GPT and spell check and God knows what, taken from Wikipedia. I don't know what people typing these days.
Yes.
But you had that skill set, and you said working for the city. Did you work under PR? So you worked under the executive branch in the mayor's office, or where were you working?
In the mayor's office.
Okay, what mayor?
I forgot. It was
Okay.
a long time back.
Okay.
So in the public relations department, that was my responsibility to do that. To be to take notes and then to transcribe letters.
So this is the 60s. So were you working with like Conrad Mallett Sr. and let's see, who else was in like some of those offices back then? I guess Bill Beckham. And do you remember any of those, like those types of figures at the time? Not really.
No.
Okay.
No. But what I remember is I can still see, I guess, the face of my supervisor and then the face of the one who was in charge of the department, but I can't tell you his name. So pretty soon afterwards, they set up a labor relations department for the police department. This was the first labor relations department, 1300 Bobian. And I was transferred there with a young white boss, director. I was transferred there.
Is this during the 70s?
It's in the 70s.
So stress that's the time of stress being out. What is it? Saving what's the stress acronym?
Got it right in my book too. Making these
So the streets
street safe, yeah.
Something basically beating the hell out of black people.
That's exactly what it was.
So I imagine, what were some of the PR and what were public relations related to that, and so people kind of get a understanding of stress. Stress was a police unit. Well, you can speak on it. What was stress?
Yeah, but so So what I remember about stress, and then I'll go to the job that I have. What I remember about stress is actually seeing them in our neighborhoods, in black cars. They were unmarked black cars, and I can see them pulling up the alongside a black young man just walking the streets, and all four of them would jump out the car, and then question him or arrest him, and take him wherever they were going to take him. But a lot of situations we would see vividly happening in the neighborhood. So when I was at the police department, and I'm trying to remember if I was like 21 now, 21 years old, the setting up the public relations department, both the director, the new director, and myself, we're both new at this. Guilford, I'm trying to remember who was in charge of the police department then. So I was kind of, to me, isolated because we just had a small little office. It was just beginning then. So in that time that I was working for the city, I also joined the Shrines of the Black Madonna.
Wow.
And that's when I think I've read several books, but I did know that there was a difference in terms of black citizenship here, and I knew there was a difference in terms of how we were treated. So this is what I did, which when I look back on it, I probably should have made a different decision. But working for the city, there was a particular dress code, and you had to wear tunics, which were tops that came mid-thigh. And because I was considering myself young and a little militant, I didn't abide by that dress code. I was little too, so I just put on my little top, and little jeans and walked to the office. And then when I reflect, this wasn't too wise of a behavior either. I would show up late. So my one-man office, he would say, well, Shelley, I don't ask much of you. Why you got to come late? And in my mind, I'm saying, well, I'm militant. I don't have to be here on time. That's what I'm saying in my immature mind. And so he did have to finally, write me up because I was rebellious, but not to me in a positive way. Because if that was the first stage of the public relations department for the police department, then I didn't see that I was instrumental in making or helping this to move off into the future. I didn't see that. So I quit. After a while, I just quit the police
hindsight
department.
is 2020.
Yeah.
And being a part of the Shrine, at that time, running concurrent, I'm assuming now from the pulpit, this is a complete different, this is a different doctrine. This is a different message that you're getting from the Shrine.
Okay.
From
Reverend
Jaramogi. Like, I assume it was like phenomenal based on like what the tradition of your father keeping more of that older guard of what would be delivered. What connected with you about the Shrine where it's like, nah, this is where I need to be centered?
It was definitely phenomenal. But I also have to realize that I'm in the midst of the civil rights movement. I'm in the midst of the power and the force of that movement, even though I was not in the movement. But being able to see it on TV, being able to see people protest, even though I wasn't there physically, I could feel this movement in black people. So what connected me to the Shrine was my older sister. She's passed on now. But she came home. We were still living with our parents on Freeland. We finally moved to Freeland after I graduated from Southeastern. My father moved us to the west side. He bought a house there. And so my sister came home with a bag of things she had purchased from the Shrine of the Black Madonna Culture Center and Bookstore on Livernois. And she pulled out earrings and a bangle. And then she pulled out the book, The Black Messiah, written by Reverend Albert B. Cleage Jr. And I said, Vernice, can I read that book? And she said, yes, just know where you got it from. I read the book in 3 days, and I said, Vernice, we need to go to that church. So my sister, my best friend, Virginia, and we caught 2 buses in January 1971. It was cold, it was snowy. Caught the Finkel bus to Linwood, and then caught the Linwood bus to Linwood and Hogarth. So when I walked into the Shrines of the Black Madonna, it was packed with young people. And the mural of the Black Madonna, that's the first thing you saw when you walked through the doors. And that's a 16-foot painting of the mother of Jesus being black and her baby. And so when we heard Reverend Albert B. Cleage Jr. speak, and he talked about the conditions that black people lived in, and that we, in our unity, could change these conditions. And if you wanted to join the liberation of black people, then this is the church for you. And so I joined that first Sunday.
Wow. And at that point, joining that Sunday and connecting with that community, because for people that know, Detroit is different. Done some different interviews with people connected to the Cultural Center, people that grew up inside of the Shrine and attended the Shrine, work with the Shrine. How after that first Sunday, how connected did you become to the works of the Shrine of Black Madonna?
Reverend Cleage made it very clear that if we're involved in a liberation struggle, there's certain things that had to change. So the first thing that we had was a list of at least 25 books that we had to read. He believed in disciplined study. So books like The Choice, Who Needs the Negro, 100 Years of Lynching, Introduction to African Civilization, The African Origins of Christianity, Black Christian Nationalism, which he wrote later. We read those books. I know that I read them. Almost every book on that list I read. And that continued my scholarly growth, were the books that were assigned to us to read. Anyone who joined the Shrine was placed in a group, because he also believed the only way that we would be held accountable and changing our behaviors would be an assignment to a group. So I was immediately assigned to a group.
Okay.
And the group had responsibilities. So we called it the Kusanya Watu. First, you had to bring others into the church. That's a Swahili term. So every member who joined had the responsibility of bringing other people into the church. Kusanya Watu. Another is Kodi. And that's a Swahili term which means voluntary taxation to build a black nation. Voluntary. So then when he explained to us that on our jobs, we are being taxed, but not voluntarily. The Detroit tax, FICA, federal tax, all those are taken out of the check before we even say it's okay to do it. And so he showed us the difference between if you're voluntarily giving for the good of your people versus taxes that are really forced upon you even though you don't realize it.
Yeah.
So Cody was one way in terms of becoming more involved. So since I was working at that time, the Shrine asked that all employed members pay $10 to Cody, and it was very clear that Cody was taking care of the electricity bills, the light bills, the gas. It was very clear what Cody was taking care of. So employed people, for the most part, that's what they said. They were going to give $10 a week to make sure that our institution, the church, would still be there.
Yeah.
On the other side was Kazi. And Kazi is communal work to build a black nation. So every Saturday, we would be cleaning up our own institutions every Saturday. So when you ask what pulled us into the work of the Shrines of the Black Madonna, I would have to say it was the ingenuity of Reverend Albert B. Cleage Jr., knowing that these young people had to have different responsibilities. I've reflected on being in our 20s, and 20s to me is elevated teenage years. but it's also a movement of energy that we don't control, but it's a movement of energy where we're trying to find ourselves in the 20s, where we're trying to reach out and find what we're here for. So the Shrines of the Black Madonna did that for me. How did I move forward? There's so much, but I do want to capitalize on this, that what that church asked me to do, I did it. And I did it within the framework of a group. So there were about 15 or 20 of us young people in the group, and we took pride in cleaning up. We took pride in inviting others to the church. In fact, there was a lot of competition.
Okay. So, so being at this, and coming from those Baptist roots of your father's church, what was, back to, like I always say, family and friends? What was the response of family and friends as definitely taking in that doctrine now is definitely more centered in Black empowerment, more centered in a different idea of what Pan-Africanism is, and so much more. What was the response of, like, do you invite your parents, your friends, the people around you, as you become more entrenched in the shrine?
Well, first, my father was against it. You see, I'm only 21, right?
Yeah.
I'm his middle
Baby.
daughter. And so he told me about the things he had heard, that Reverend Cleage only let light-skinned people into his church, that he really didn't like people my color. And I said, well, Daddy, I don't think that's true, because his right-hand man, Oscar Hands, is very dark. So he didn't think it was going to be good for me at all. So he just didn't. He just didn't. He didn't want me to be in the Shrines of the Black Madonna. As I began to study and realize that most of the people in the Bible were Black, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Jewish people, Jesus, Mary, they were all Black African people. So I went and told my father, Daddy, did you know that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, all those are Black people? And he told me, yes, I did know, but there was nothing I could do about it. And after a while, he just accepted the fact that I was going to remain at the Shrines of the Black Madonna.
That's and I like to contextualize this, because just back to also some of those universal understandings and where people are in the arc of where what that growth and understanding and that protection. And it's funny you mentioned up the whole, like, they only let light-skinned people in. That is a pervasive thing that has been said about the Shrine of the Black Madonna, which I definitely don't believe, but it's definitely been stated. But also that a lot of movements sometimes look back at revisionist history, like even like Dr. King. People make it seem like everybody Black was like, we love Dr. King. It was not a lot of support for many reasons. Sometimes a lot of protection, and sometimes people will look at it and just be dismissive of it, like they were just wrong because they were older. Not necessarily. It's more context to it. And I'm not necessarily saying one thing of how you may feel about not just your father, but others that may have felt that way. But it's layers and dynamics to many of these discussions and understanding, and also the Blackness that does exist in Christianity. Like, I was shocked and surprised through my dad's girlfriend. She was like, King James was Black. I was like, man, get out of here. And then I was like, damn, I guess King James was Black. So yes, King James of the King James Bible, that was a Black man, as many of the families and look at the what is that? The monarchy of those times were Black people. And some of these stories are definitely suppressed through history, because obviously through history comes a traditions of pride. When we look at a lot of histories, when we think of what that Black story could be, is these pervasive narratives of us not achieving, or any of our success being attributed to someone white, honoring what we do. But then when you understand more of the context of history, you're like, one second. this is just kind of like a snapshot in time.
Yeah.
But most of time, it's been Black people trading, engaging in institution buildings, starting with that first institution of family, strengthening qualities of life that cross international waters. Like, the more you look at history, the chances of finding this skin complexion, your skin complexion, darker than me and you, very high. So I just wanted to speak to that.
It is. And with King James, I guess there may be different histories about him, but a King James version is not King James who wrote the Bible, it's King James Version.
Mhm.
And he helped canonize the Bible. They took books out of the Bible.
Mhm.
90% of the books in the Old Testament have been taken out,
Mhm.
and 30% of the books in the Old Testament have been taken out. So the Apocrypha, which talks about the African Jewish rebellion against the Greeks, you may find that in the New Jerusalem Bible, but you're not going to find it in the King James Version. Some wordings were changed to continually put us in a state of being submissive. In fact, some were misinterpreted so that spiritual teachings by us are attributed to another race of people.
Yes.
So in terms of African origins, the shrines helped me to learn about that through my reading and studying. And what I have come to learn through reading and studying, that in every quote-unquote race of people, Japanese, Chinese, Indian, Philippines, you're going to find, if you trace it back, you're going to find Black people.
Yeah.
The Native Americans, the same thing.
Yeah.
And so this is not just fantasy or hearsay. Because of technology and able to do research and to trace back, not just through carbon tests, but through DNA. Now there's a documentary called The Real Eve. The beginning of human life began with a Black woman, and it's not through, again, fantasy. It's through being able to use this technology to see this prominent gene.
And sometimes it's just going and traveling the world and looking at the statues.
Yes.
Ivan Van Sertima, which
Yes.
Baba Malik speaks about. They
Yes.
come before Columbus, and that kind of has some ties that goes to brothers and sisters in Detroit too. Like, some of these things you just see when you go certain places, and it's like, oh man. Even when I did my collard green cook-off this past in 2023, and Baba Malik hooked me in with another group in Atlanta that does a collard green festival, and they were giving me more of the history of the collard green and even like some of the herbs and some of the things that go back to Africa. The collard green itself was looked at as a weed that is something that traveled with our people generations ago. So hence the reason why we're eating so many collards, back to like you say, like Black people is poor and a lot of the things, is because it was looked at as a weed and not a delicacy from white families. But we knew, no, we gonna cook that. We gonna make that good. We can get something in here, and we gonna get some pot liquor, and we gonna get some cornbread or some hot sauce. Well, that's what I'm gonna get. but this is like, and then you start tracing it, yams and things like that, and it's like, damn, this goes deep. Hence that culture, creativity, and community all intersecting that I like to offer through Detroit is different. Like, a lot of these things culturally have some substantive ties that deal with a lot of the ways that we've grown, learned, survived, and even flipped things into something that what I call just like, man, that's Black. You know what I'm saying? Like, you be like, word, for real? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then, our oppressors start looking at us like, damn, this food is amazing. What's going on over here? You know what I'm saying? So now you go in Whole Foods and collard greens costing a whole lot more than they used to cost because other people were like, this is a great dish. you know?
Yeah.
So we shift off and get into something else. But this has always been the arc of what our people have done.
Yes, and I just learned something new about collard greens, and that's really so important in terms of us telling our stories. To me, they're just phenomenal, and they connect us, and they allow us to gain more knowledge. Because, like I said, that's the first history I've heard of collard greens.
Yeah, I mean, it's phenomenal. And then as we get into that and we get into a close, I'm gonna definitely bring you back because there's so much more to your story I got to get into. But I definitely want to get into doctor now. So where do you pick back up with your academic journey to lean into academia, and then offer some of these teachings about our people?
Okay, so because of time, so I was in the shrines of the Black Madonna for 30 years, and I was in an expansion cadre, which meant I served a lot of time in Houston, and some people served in Atlanta. So in that time, Reverend Clay believed that he had to give responsibility to young people and let them learn, but not let them drown. And so we learned how to be group leaders. And we studied books on how to be group leaders. We learned how to be shrine administrators. I was a shrine administrator, Shrine 2 on Mack and Burns, used to be. Then the shrine also moved into KUA, the science of becoming what you already are. And that is to rediscover the spark of divinity that's inside of you. And that spark of divinity was given to you at the moment you were created in your mother's womb. And so that spark of divinity can be awakened and then united with the transcendent God. So God for us was not Jesus. God for us is this unified energy field in which we live. And so that spark of divinity in terms of KUA, where the power can come to a person, but when that power comes to a group, it's a whole different story in terms of influence and impact that we can make. So my testimony is that I actually experienced the deeper levels of my energy system being activated. I actually experienced that. So sitting in a meditation position, a great white light and hot started at the base of my spine, and it moved up through the top of my body and out my head. I didn't know what it was at that time. I'm only 21. And the yoga instructor told me that I didn't think you would have it this soon, but she never told me what it was. And then the traditional church, they never speak of that a person can actually have an energy experience with God while they are alive, not when they're dead and gone. So no one can tell me that this God of power and energy does not exist because I've experienced it. And that is my testimony and the story that I need to tell. And why it came at 21, it opened up every energy center. We have 7 energy centers. It opened up every one. So in Eastern philosophy, they call it Kundalini. In the shrines of the Black Madonna, we call it Kugasana, where your inner divinity comes into contact with the transcendent power. And that's actually what happened to me. So the church moved through this process of redefining who God is, and it's in agreement with what scientists say, and who we are as energy beings. So that growth and reading up on meditation, yoga, I taught children yoga and meditation. I taught children, along with other members, Black history, so our children were grounded in who they were. They were grounded in how Jesus looked and what color he was. So in the shrines, I began to rise through the ranks. Not that I was seeking it, but Jaramogi Abebe Agyeman, Reverend Albert B. Cleage, had made a decision that he was going to build a different world, a different nation with young people. So I became a group leader by making one statement. I was sitting with about 25 other people, and we had orientation every Friday night where we were learning more about Black Christian nationalism, about powerlessness, about slave culture behavior. And a group was assigned to set up. The person in charge said that they didn't do anything that was correct. And so I'm still kind of new, and I'm still sitting there with about 25 other people, and I raised my hand, and I said, you can't assume that people know. So I'm suggesting you devise a checklist and train them on it, and then I believe you'll get a better job out of them. And then Reverend Albert B. Cleage said, make her a group leader. And that's how I became a group leader. I became a minister, a bishop, a cardinal. I was over the youth ministry for 21 years in Houston. I helped to develop KUA, the Science of Becoming What You Already Are. I helped to develop the KUA devotional system that we have. And if you ask me why did I stay committed that long, well, two things. I believed in the leadership of Reverend Albert B. Cleage. I trusted his leadership. Nobody is perfect, don't get me wrong, but I trusted his leadership because basically what he asked us to do, some of the things he couldn't do, but we purchased apartment complexes and we made those our residence halls and training centers.
Yeah.
And the first one we purchased, he said, you all have to learn how to live together as black people. So that was that 7-story Abington Hotel that has been repurchased by someone else. That's where we began to learn how to take care of each other's children by setting up a nursery. How do we cook in communal dining halls to feed people? Our security, we had our own security, own office managers. So that type of work, being involved in the work and knowing that the objective is we are black, we are oppressed, we seek to end our oppression, that's the objective, and that I'm building a better world for my children and for my children's children, that's what kept me.
Okay. And that's there, but I definitely want to, and I love that you gave so much more context as this shrine story. It picks up, and shout out to one of my closest friends, Nandi Cromer, the Michigan Poet Laureate, that spoke about being a child in the shrine, growing up in the training center, and what that experience was like for her. But even though those students going over to the school in that neighborhood, that eventually had that program that became Flicks. So the foreign language immersive, studies school that started with so many of the students from the shrine, but many of those students had a different understanding and grounding already. I wanted to ask, like, the when do you begin that academic journey again? When do you pick up with that?
That's a good question.
You know?
That was such a good question. Okay, so I didn't answer that.
But no, I love that you spoke to the shrine because that was going to be the next question I asked. So you just...
I'm sorry. No, what happened, I stopped going to Wayne State.
Yep.
And then in that interim, I joined the Shrines of the Black Madonna.
Yes.
Right? For 17 years, I had not gone to a university. I was a full-time missionary.
At the shrine.
Mm-hmm. So one day, Reverend Clay came to me because I was over the youth ministry, and he said, you need to go back to school.
Interesting.
He said, you need to go back to school, and you need to get a teacher's certification. And so I went back to school.
What school did you pick?
Since I was residing in Houston, I went to the University of Houston.
What year?
It was in, oh my goodness.
The main reason I asked because I'm a sports fan. Was this the Five Slam and Jammer years?
Oh my goodness, I forgot.
Did you see Hakeem Olajuwon?
Wait, maybe in I saw him in 1990, something like that.
Okay.
I went back.
Okay, he was Hakeem.
Yeah, I remember him. So I went back and I got my bachelor's degree, and also I was certified to teach.
So okay, and then I bring this up because I'm one of those, as they say, like later students too. After I did not get my now I have my master's, which is continuing in studies and everything, and it looks like when I figure out whatever I want to write, I'll probably end up with a PhD too. But I was an older student too, like kind of picking back up with college more serious and grounded at like 28. What was it like for you picking up that journey? Because sometimes I know for me, it made more sense being the old head in the classroom. What was it like being for you?
I went back with a different purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And so my biggest, I think, hurdle
Mm-hmm.
was here we're learning in the shrines of the Black Madonna about a white enemy system.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how do I go back to school
Yeah.
and I have white professors?
Mm.
So I had to settle that in my mind. That we talking about institutionalized racism. Every white person is not bad, right? But what I had to settle in my mind, I am a black Christian nationalist. This is what I settled. Black, I don't have any problem with that. I belong to African people. That's my ancestry. Nationalist, I don't have a problem with that because I do believe that we're in self-determination for black people. The Christian part, as a Christian, I need to respect the spirits and the behaviors of others. And that's what helped me to make that. And so I had white professors who supported me, who wrote reference letters for me, who granted me positions on the university level as a student. I'd like to tell one quick story, and then I tell you how I got my master's degree. But okay, so I got my bachelor's, right? And I get my teacher certification. But I am not really going into a public school. I'm using this for the children at the Shrines of the Black Madonna. I set up their whole program. So I didn't want to go back to school after I got my bachelor's because there were so many deadlines to me. But in 2 years, I went back to Reverend Clegg and I said, I feel I need to go back and get my master's degree. And he said, well, while you're at it, get your doctor's degree too.
Interesting.
And so I enrolled and I got my master's degree in 2 years in curriculum and instruction, elementary education. And I proceeded on to get my doctor's degree in curriculum and instruction. So what happened as I was closing out my, as I went into doctorate study, I had a professor. She was Caucasian. I remember her so vividly, Dr. Nath, I'm going to call her name. She said, Shelley, have you thought about working as a graduate assistant? And I told her, no, I'm a full-time doctoral student, and I don't think I can do anything else. So she said, well, pull an application in anyway. Just slide it under my door. Just my first year in doctoral studies. That's what I did. In 2 weeks, she calls me, and she says, I want you to work for me, and you will be looking at pre-service teachers. You'll be looking at how they teach. You're going to give them a post-conference. And then she left and went out of town. But because of my organizational skills, I did it phenomenally. I'm just going to say it because that's what she said, how I did that job. So when she came back, she said, I can't believe that you did this. I had organized everything. So in those 3.5
You kind of got like a decade and some change of work for doing it already. Well, little to what her understanding was. Yes.
That's right. So in those 3.5 years in doctoral studies, she made sure I had a position as a graduate assistant. And then she was on my dissertation committee. And since she was an English major, she edited my whole dissertation. At the final part of getting a doctoral degree, she said, have you put in the application at the University of Houston downtown? And I said, no, I didn't see a job posting. But I had put in applications in different cities because they want you to go out for 6 years and then come back, most universities. So I had been accepted. The University of Alabama wanted me to come there and be in charge of their teacher education program. But I didn't accept that one because I was still a member of the Shrines of the Black Madonna. Well, long story short, she told me to put an application in anyway at the University of Houston downtown. I graduated from the University of Houston main campus. And lo and behold, I graduated in May 2022. And by the end, the beginning of May, by the end of May, I was working at the University of Houston downtown. in their teacher education program, urban education program.
2002, I'm guessing. You said 22.
I'm sorry, 2002.
Yep.
You're right, 2002.
Okay.
And I taught those who wanted to become teachers.
And Lord knows you come with what I call, and that's kind of the other thing I like about my experience of being a old head student. It's like I had the wisdom of life experience.
Yeah.
And now sometimes I believe this is a Kari perspective. I don't know if you would agree with this. And I do want you to put up your book too, so people can check that out. But
Okay.
I think college and academia itself kind of provides a more universal understanding to communicate with groups of people in larger settings, meaning that the idea of having my marketing degree, I assume you understand a little bit about demographics. Like if you put me in a room with another, like for instance, a new project we working on, I'm gonna be in a room with a couple different people from some marketing firms, some people from the city and other places. So being that we'll all be in a room, being that we've all kind of taken some of the same courses, we have better understandings of like value propositions, here we go, a feasibility study of how effective this marketing plan may be. Like it doesn't mean that we all agree. It doesn't even I think we all agree in method, but we can move some conversations a lot faster than if I were in a group with people that don't have this understanding. Not saying that I couldn't present the theory to those people either, but now maybe a project that would take with people that with no marketing degree, the same project may take 10 days. If you get me in a room with other people with that marketing and PR experience, maybe the project may take 7 days. So that 3 days worth of work moves fast. Like even like I often tell people, and this is no offense because you haven't taken all the classes I've taken, marketing, public relations, publicity, promotions, advertising are different. Marketing is a suite where they all sit under, and then you start explaining to people what the differences are. And then now when, you put me in a room with a person, it's like, yeah, that's a good promotion, meaning a promotion. And here we go, 101. Here goes some school for y'all. A promotion means like you buy one, you get one free. Publicity means, hey, we're giving everybody free basketballs so that you can support my business. Advertising means it's just a commercial. So you may have an advertisement for a promotion. You know what I'm saying? So now if you get me in a room with most marketing people, we can have these discussions where nobody's just having over talking. And it's like, hey, I'm going to focus on branding. And then it's like, okay, so we're moving it forward. So these are just things that, it just becomes a little bit more universal in understanding. Not necessarily saying that it will strengthen your critical thinking skills. Not even necessarily saying it'll make you better at what you do. But you'll be better to be a part of groups.
I agree with you. Mm-hmm. Basically, you have a wider knowledge base. Mm-hmm. And that, I tell people I'm a doctor of curriculum and instruction. I'm not a medical doctor. So if you sit me down in a room of those who study curriculum and instruction, I'm going to be an essential part of that. Yep. But I can't be in a room with the old marketing degree. I wouldn't even know the first thing to talk about except Facebook, right? I wouldn't know. So they're different areas of knowledge, and I agree with you. So in terms of learning, getting a master's degree and a doctor's degree in curriculum and instruction, that widened my knowledge base.
That's great.
And then when I talk to others who may not, for instance, had the teacher education preparation in terms of philosophies and theories and practice, it takes a longer time to try to convince them or to teach them what effective teaching is.
Yes, and that's all. Because, if it's universal understandings. So now, my very last question.
Okay.
Because you were there for so long. And in the 90s, black folks was going to Atlanta. Right now, black folks is going to Houston. You were at the Pulse in Houston to watch there was always black folks in Houston for people that don't know. And I strongly suggest you go. Houston's a good city.
Yeah.
You a black brother. You gonna make some good acquaintances. Houston. What was it like watching Houston kind of become more of this metropolis that black folks are centered in? Because especially like right now, it's like black folks is it's the new Atlanta, as they say. What was it like watching that come to life?
Well, I'm going to have to be very honest with you, Brother Curry. I don't think I would have gone to Houston if I had not been assigned.
I know.
But I'm glad that I went to Houston. Okay, so Houston was moving into this technology, and the church sent about 10, 15 people down there first to be trained in that technology. And so an expansion cadre went down there later. I did go. And so what I've noticed about Houston, just at the very beginning, is that it seemed to me like a big country city. I saw horses on the medium, and that kind of blew my mind.
Folks there.
But it grew and expanded during the time that I was there. I left Houston in 2004 and moved back. I left Houston in 2007 and moved back to Detroit. But during that time in Houston, you could buy a bigger house for less money in Houston. I thought also that the city of Houston has some pretty smart government, because when the suburbs developed, the city of Houston annexed those suburbs. And the suburbs had to pay the taxes back to Houston, and that's how they were able to keep their downtown area up to standards. I thought that was pretty smart, and they're still doing that now. But in terms of the growth of the University of Houston main campus, that's one of your top research universities now. Areas have been redeveloped, Brother Kari. But then in every city, there's still gentrification, and that's what happens in Houston too. But there are opportunities. There are many opportunities in Houston. I have a sister there and some nieces and great nieces, and they're all doing pretty well.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where just like out of nowhere, maybe around like 2010, 11, people was like, yeah, I'm gonna go on and check out Houston. Like it started becoming more of a prevalent discussion as like, so people get this idea. Let's talk the arc of Black Americans. One point in time, it was Detroit where people wanted to come.
Yes.
Then Black people started going to Atlanta.
Yeah.
Now I think Black people going to Houston.
Well, you know what? That's pretty interesting, because Atlanta was the first expansion city in the South for the Shrines of the Black Madonna. Reverend Cleage thought about, okay, so we went to Atlanta in 1972. And then 5 years later, the Southwestern region, and that's where the cadre went to Houston to set up the Shrines of the Black Madonna in Houston, Texas. So I think it may have been before your time.
Yes, a couple days before me. But yeah, like all, Maynard Jackson days and all of that stuff. And you think of like that Black power base. But yeah, and then let me say this too, because I know it's a couple people I know from North Carolina. It is a lot of Black folks moving to that Raleigh and Charlotte area. But not like Houston. Houston is like, people are you catch a flight to Houston, it's like catching a flight to Atlanta. It's gonna be somebody on there with with a good amount of soul food sitting next to you. Ain't like catching a flight to San Diego or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You gonna get on, it's like when you get in the airport terminal on a flight to Houston, you like, yep. I'm going to Houston.
I'm going to
Houston, Detroit, and Atlanta.
Yeah.
You're going to be like, yeah, I'm going to the crib.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's going to be some shea butter on that flight.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you so much. I'm going to have to get you back. Please let people know about your book. You got a book.
Okay, yes. So it's Memoir of a Black Christian Nationalist, Seeds of Liberation. And it tells my story of becoming a member of the Shrines of the Black Madonna, because it has such an impact on my life. But it not only has that, it has the appendix that has all the official documentations by Reverend Cleage, because we had to be oriented. Our minds had to be redeveloped. So it's like a BCN statement of faith, BCN teaches, BCN philosophy. It also has, which I think is very important, the Black church's change agent and what slave culture behavior is and what counterculture behaviors are. So it tells a personal story. In some parts, there may be some laughing. In some parts, there may be some deep emotions. But it's wrapped around the teachings and the theology and my personal experiences.
I love it. I love it. And in that same vein, I'm going to put up the information. It's going to be like on the side that you'll be giving a presentation at our Keebelon Village sometime soon. So check that out. And I'm going to look forward to getting that book. And I definitely appreciate all of the sermons that one of my favorite historians, the great Paul Lee, gave me of Reverend Jaramogi at a time, because hearing okay, first off, those were different types of sermons. I can only imagine, like right now they're different types of sermons. It's like, what in the Khalid Muhammad is going on here? So I can only imagine what it was like back then. You know what I'm saying? So
I did it, if I may intercept here. I did my presentation at a Keebelon Village yesterday. KUA, the practice of becoming who you already are. And I will do the same presentation at Sergeant Baker Institute? General Baker.
Oh,
General Baker
GBI.
Institute.
Carolyn
GBI.
and them. Okay,
Yes.
GBI.
On February 17th at 12
It's going to
o'clock.
be the 17th. GBI. Oh, we definitely love Carolyn.
Yes,
Another
yes.
person coming over this way. But
Okay.
yes. Okay, GBI. I thought that it was coming to our Keebelon soon. But GBI, definitely. We want to check that out. I'm going to look to definitely possibly be present too.
Okay.
If time permits. This is going to be fun.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you.
McIntosh.
Thank you very much. I'm so much appreciate this.
All right.
Okay.
Peace.
Black revolutionaries, distillery owners, Italian fashion retailers, and Motown Grammy winners all share their best stories never before told in any other media outlets on Detroit is Different. Visit DetroitisDifferent.com or download the Detroit is Different app on Apple's App Store or Google's Play Store.